Hi, Mike from RMT Family here. Today I gotta cut up this here. This is a mobile home frame, the chassis of a mobile home, and we need to chop it up in smaller pieces to make a rack for fuel tanks, so that we have farm fuel tanks out here that are higher up, so we can gravity fill the tractor, the ATVs, etc. I was gonna do that with a 4-inch grinder with cutting blades on it, but it's extremely difficult to do. As you can see here, there is multiple angles here in every which direction, and so just to get these cross beams out, it's pretty dangerous trying to cut that with the small cutting wheel. As the frame flexes some, it may get the wheel stuck, and then the grinder will spin around the wheel and possibly get me hurt or something. So the other option is using a torch, an oxygen acetylene torch, to chop this up, but that requires 2 tanks, one with oxygen, one with acetylene. Tanks are not cheap. Even the torch setup is pretty expensive if you want a good one, and you gotta go refill those tanks whenever you run out. So I opted for a plasma cutter. This is the one I got here. It's a Chicago Electric. This is from Harbor Freight. This is not the one I wanted to buy. They had 2 options. The other one was like $250 more, but would have been a 110 220 unit, so double voltage. This here is just a 220. So for that reason I had to do some special wiring here, temporary wiring with some direct burial cable that I had, and hook that directly to my breaker box in order to get this thing going, as I was planning on using just an extension cord on the other one, but the other one's out of stock for another 2 months. So they had this one and I opted for this. Disadvantage, like I said, it's only single voltage, only high voltage. You can't disconnect your cords here in the front like you could on the other one. So for transporting it, it's a little more trouble. What I had to do to make it work for me is I had to change the air fitting, because the fittings I use are an industrial type. They're completely different. So this is not like the regular short ones. This one is a little longer, and so I had to change the fitting on it. But well, it's powered up, the air is set, and so I'm basically ready to cut, and the air is provided by my trusty old Craftsman compressor over here. I had this one for like 15 years now. It worked hard and it's still going good, so we're using it to supply the air to this. And that's the big advantage of the plasma cutter. You don't have to go back and buy any sort of gas, exchange your tanks or whatever. You use your compressor and use this machine only. There's a couple wear parts on the gun here on the tip. They give you a couple spares with it, and you can purchase more, but at least this way we don't have to run around for gas and depend on somebody else somewhere else and run around getting it. We can't run out of air unless the compressor quits, which that's a different story, and it hopefully does not. So, but yeah, I'm gonna start cutting up this here. What I need from this are these here. These are the I-beams. That's the actual frame. I don't need the cross members right now. I need the I-beams so I can weld the rack for the fuel tanks. This here is the 4-inch grinder that I was using. You can see it's got super skinny blades. Those are cutting blades. But yeah, it's just not made to do that much cutting with these tricky angles that are on there. You go through a lot of blades. As soon as the blade gets a little smaller, it's hard to get into the angles there and finish the cut. So that's where the plasma cutter comes in handy. So for those of you that don't work with grinders very often, as you can see, this is a thick grinding blade for metal. It's 3/16 thick. That's what you use to grind with, grinding down things, not cutting things. Then this here is the metal cutoff wheel, which is only 3/64 thick, super skinny. So this is what you use to cut things apart with. So those are the two different wheels that I commonly use, is the cutting and the grinding wheel on my little 4-inch grinder. So I've been cutting for a little bit. Cut all this stuff out. I left the ground always right there in the same spot. So this is one of my first cuts. And so it's this one. And here we got second cuts. And comes out pretty clean actually. And you can see as I do more cuts, it seems to get a little faster. This is one that I cut off with the grinder. So you can see there's a lot more left on the I-beam compared to this where I get most of it off. And there's another cut. And there we got another cut. So now I gotta cut the I-beam over here. You can see I already tried to cut this, or did, with the grinder. But there's a couple places that I can't get to right up in there unless I put a new blade on every time. Same thing down here. Couldn't really get to it unless I put a new blade on. So I'm gonna try cutting that. Here I already started cutting with the grinder, but I'm gonna see if I can cut this just with a plasma cutter and go nice and straight, and take my time to see if I can get a nice clean cut out of this. This here is the box that the welder came in. So it's a Chicago Electric, but the thing is, it is 240 only. So you gotta have 240 volts available. And that's one of the disadvantages of this one, as well as the cords are permanently attached, so you can't detach them. It makes it a little harder to put away, store, or transport the thing. Other than that, it's probably about the same as the more expensive one. So another benefit I found using this plasma cutter compared to a torch is that it makes a much smaller, nicer cut, and it doesn't have a long flame coming out that could catch all these pine needles here on fire. So we got a lot of pine needles out here, and with the torch I'm sure I would have caught them on fire. With this plasma cutter I didn't have any issues whatsoever. So that's another benefit of having a plasma cutter over a torch, is you don't light things on fire as easy. There's still a chance, but much slimmer. So I'm done cutting this trailer frame down. I got the pieces I need. We're going to leave this for the moment. At some point we were thinking about making this into a tiny home or something. Not sure yet. It could become another mobile barn. We got already a barn on wheels. That would be another possibility. There's about 16 feet left right now, so we'll see what we'll do with it at some other point. At this time I just needed all the pieces to weld a rack. So let me show you the last cut here. So it cuts pretty good, this little machine here. In the beginning I had the power a little lower and the air pressure a little lower, but then I went higher and was cutting faster. I was not necessarily looking to get the best cuts, the nicest cuts, just to cut it. And it worked pretty good. It's overall pretty basic machine, but it works good. What I really liked is the long cord here to the gun. That was super handy. So I had my ground attached here, but I was able to get all the way up there to the tongue jack basically. So that makes it real easy. The machine performed flawlessly. The fan is on all the time. While working outside, that's not such a big deal. But if you're working inside a shop or so, you might want the fan to turn off and just come on as needed. And I believe the more expensive machine does do that. But here this fan runs all the time, which, okay. Out here we had wind today anyway, no big deal. For the price, I would say pretty darn good. We didn't cut very thick material. As you can see, the I-beam is pretty much the thickness we cut, except for a couple places where we had to cut through the brackets. So right here, this is the thickest we cut, so about 3/8 of an inch, and it blasted right through there, no problem. So these here are all the pieces we cut out today. So we did quite some cutting, including cut the pipe in multiple places. I did not pay any attention to the duty cycle at all. If you don't know what the duty cycle is, that tells you, the duty cycle tells you how long you can run the machine continuously until you need to take a break. I just kept going and going. Obviously you stop the machine to move around, carry a piece away or whatever, but I never maxed out on the duty cycle. I was on a lower amperage, so that allows me to go longer than if I would be cutting thicker material on a higher amperage. But to cut this, I never had to stop because the machine wouldn't keep up. So the machine did fine. So this little machine is great as far as I'm concerned. Would work on any farm, homestead, ranch, wherever, as long as you're not cutting with it all day long every day. This will work wonderful. If you're cutting all day long and you really cut thick material with this little one, you may have to take a break just because of the duty cycle. You may have to give it a 5-minute break every so often. And another thing I want to point out real quick is I used the Chicago electric helmet as well. This is the one that self-darkens. Oops. It's got an adjustment over here, so I set it to the lowest setting as I wasn't welding, and this worked perfect actually for this job. The only problem I had was when the sun was shining in from the backside, it was hard to see what I'm working on. But that only happens outdoors as you're working in the sun. So now we're gonna drag this away from here off to the side, and we'll decide later what we'll do with it. We still have the axles. I may weld the brackets back on for the springs and reinstall an axle to make this back into a trailer, or I may chop it apart all the way and use it for other projects. I'm not sure yet. But yes, this little plasma cutter from Harbor Freight did great, and I personally would recommend it, like I said, as long as you got 240 volts available. So this was it for today. Please like and subscribe. If you have any questions or comments, put them down below. I also have a link for that plasma cutter down below. Well, thank you for watching. Bye.